In the complex hierarchy of power, a few men fell short of the strength wielded by the four great brothers themselves. Among these, even the commanding authority of a San from the house of Elad, comparable to the power held by a ship's captain with the firepower to level entire continents, was surpassed. The admiral of a fleet, who could devastate an entire star system, paled in comparison to the might of the great houses. Of all the brothers, it was Elad of might who was the linchpin, something his children understood better than anyone else. Bernard had the power to facilitate faster-than-light travel with his vision, and Pius's inventions were revolutionary in any field he chose. But it was Elad who guarded the Federal Republic when Polus's creations failed and Bernard's sight betrayed him. When everything was falling apart, and the very existence of the human race was at stake, it was to Elad they turned. His sons and daughters would answer the call, a duty as certain as the rising sun. They were entrusted with this grand mission and counseled to remain humble and stoic, acting with the reverence and respect their noble charge entailed. Failure would mean the end of the human race. Thus, Kanan Jason stood silently, arms crossed, observing the near chaos of the bridge before him. He admired the admiral's skill in sifting through crucial information amid the shouted alerts. The display tank dominating the room was a chaotic mess of contacts and colors, with clouds of missiles streaming from our billion ships closing in on the fleet. The alien vessels barreled through storms of return fire, leaving a wake of debris that confused the sensors. Even as one destroyer exploded in a spectacular fashion, momentarily washing out the display, the admiral continued his steady stream of commands. Through all this, the San remained still in his armor, resembling a statue. San Jason's armor loosely resembled the metal plate armor of old Earth, covering him completely. Unlike the old armor, this one had a brutal simplicity, with hard angles to deflect blows and a dense mesh underneath to absorb and distribute impacts. This semi-organic mesh could contract to assist the wearer with extra strength and clench a puncture shut to prevent rapid blood loss in a vacuum. San Jason, the admiral's voice cut through the constant chatter, causing the son of Elad to stir. It seems we'll be needing the services of your men. Just as Elad had predicted, they turned to him. It wasn't hard to see why. While the Arbillion launched vast quantities of missiles, their favorite tactic was to crash into other vessels, with the branches of their ships bending to envelop and trap their victims, allowing large, strong aliens to board. As one of the alien vessels bore down on them, pushing through the torrent of fire from the Federal ship, it was clear that this was their fate. The ships had Marines, regular humans armed with low-velocity weapons to kill targets without damaging the ship, but against the Arbillion, something more was needed. House Cease will see them off, Jason said simply, turning to leave the bridge. Utilizing the extensive communication systems built into his armor, he rapidly informed the rest of his men. All 400 were present on the ship, waiting for the call, knowing it would come. The sons of Elad were different from others. While they were spread loosely across the entire Republic, Elad's children formed houses, each taking possession of a single planet under their charge. These worlds existed for one purpose: creating soldiers. Carefully curated bloodlines were passed from generation to generation, introducing new blood as needed. The sons of Elad were bred almost like horses, maximizing the power and benefits gifted to them by their progenitor. Gene therapy further enhanced these gifts, making the sons of Elad strong and tough. "Sir, how soon can we expect boarders?" One of Jason's captains spoke over the command channel. Before he could respond, the ship shook, and people floated into the air as something impacted the far side of the vessel, only to slam back into the ground as gravity reasserted control. Of the dozens rushing up and down the hallway, only Jason landed on his feet, the sound of his heavy boots echoing along the corridor. Hostiles cutting through outer hull, frame 15 at 1 o'clock, came the first of many rapid reports. Jason's lieutenants responded quickly, needing little input from him. Any other commander might have felt satisfaction at how his men were responding, but for the sons of Elad, this was expected. Every brother shipped out from their world had to undergo extensive training, both physical and mental. They had to demonstrate at least minimal proficiency in everything from basic tactics to logistics, often performing complex tasks in high-stress environments with their lives on the line. as many drills involved live ammunition. By the time Jason reached his command squad, they had joined another as the Arbillion began cutting through the outer hull. Due to the design of ships, boarding parties always seemed to emerge from the floor. Only when trying to make entry on a slope or wing did they avoid fighting against the ship's gravity. This minor advantage was one the sons of Elad fully exploited. "Grenades!" the sergeant of the other squad shouted as the alien cutting device finally finished, and a rough circle of steel fell away. A half-dozen grenades, expertly thrown, followed the circle of metal as the aliens pushed it out of the way. Deep explosions rocked the hallway. Had there been any atmosphere in the outer layer of the ship, they might have heard the pained cries of the first wave of boarders. Despite the destruction caused by the grenades, the alien assault was only momentarily delayed. The first wave of attackers, typical of the aliens' tactics, surged from the breach. Leading the charge were the strange four-legged servitor beasts, commonly found on their ships. These creatures, no larger than a hound, had thick hides and several carapace plates covering their heads and shoulders. Extensive genetic engineering enabled them to survive in a vacuum and made them loyal and deadly, even to armored troops. "Fire!" shouted Sergeant Malik over the local channel. Both squads of Elad's sons responded immediately. The light cannons they wielded looked like rifles in their massive hands, but the recoil would have shattered the shoulder of all but the strongest humans. Even for the sons of Ard, they had to brace themselves properly. Against these small servitor beasts, the cannons were devastating. Caught in a crossfire, the heavy rounds turned the first wave into a meat grinder, punching ragged holes in thick, fur-covered hides and shattering the unnaturally tough carapace. Within seconds, the fire reduced at least 100 of the monstrous creatures to bloody corpses, piling up around the breach's edge. Tragically, this was part of the alien strategy. Even as great masses of their gene-altered servitors were slaughtered, more continued to pour into the human ship until it became difficult to distinguish between the corpses and the living beasts. These servitors, adept at burrowing, pushed through the bloody remains of their comrades, driven into a frenzied rage that obliterated any thoughts of fear or self-preservation. After nearly a minute, when the pile of dead alien hounds nearly reached the ceiling, the Arbillion warriors finally appeared. They showed as little concern for the hounds as the beasts did for themselves, pushing through the wall of bodies, their heavy armor stained a grisly red. Taller even than the sons of Elad, the hulking aliens had long, curved limbs ending in 4 razor-sharp claws. A narrow, animalistic head on a short neck contained 4 beady eyes and a narrow mouth. Their short legs forced them to use their massive forelimbs for movement, but this didn't slow them down as they pulled themselves forward, with more servitor beasts swarming around their legs. Torrents of fire from the driver cannons slammed into each alien as it emerged from the churning mass of flesh and fur. The heavy spikes struggled to penetrate the thick armor, but that was little consolation. The smaller alien servitors hadn't been dangerous enough to warrant it. But as soon as the hulking Arbillion emerged, every member of House Su switched to the more deadly thermite-filled rounds. Each shell contained a small amount of jellied thermite that stuck to the alien's armor. The thermite didn't burn long, but it burned hot enough to melt long scores in the armor even in an airless environment. Thermal stresses quickly caused cracks to appear, slightly weakening each plate for follow-up rounds. When the thermite-filled rounds finally penetrated, the results were noticeable. With the oxygen inside the armor, they burned much hotter for a split second, often burning long trails through the alien's flesh. Against humans, even a single hit would result in death from shock due to the pain. But the massive Arbillion merely bellowed in anger and pain. Their roars were powerful enough to be heard through the metal flooring and the thin atmosphere of gun smoke and vaporized blood. The Arbillion were persistent. Even as the first of their number fell to the massive driver rounds and deadly thermite payloads, more climbed into the human ship to take their place. The swarm of servitor hounds had slowed but hadn't stopped. With their master serving as both destruction and cover, they started to reach the human lines. Rows of triangular teeth filled their hateful maws, and the beasts didn't seem to care as dozens broke each time they bit at the armored plates of the sons of Elad. Each beast that made it momentarily distracted a trooper, slamming into the humans hard enough to force them off balance or threatening to drag them to the ground, even as they failed to chew through the armor. "Grenades!" shouted Captain Jason, knowing it was time to start a fighting retreat. While the aliens' numbers seemed endless, he knew they weren't. The aliens would gather in the outer sections of their ship, preparing for the next wave of their relentless assault. As the humans prepared for the boarding action, they spread out around their own ship, lacking the coordination that the aliens possessed. The aliens were dispersed all around their vessel, rather than concentrating their forces at the anticipated point of contact. Explosions ripped through the advancing mass of alien flesh and armor, giving the sons of Karish a brief moment to regroup. Seizing the opportunity, Commander Jacob issued quick, sharp orders that led half of his squad to retreat while the other half provided cover fire. The aliens capitalized on the reduced incoming fire. One particularly aggressive Xyrillian surged forward, its elongated arm swinging out to catch one of Jacob's men by the arm. The creature's razor-sharp claws dug deeply into the thick metal of the soldier's armor, and its immense strength began to crush the limb. Reacting swiftly, the soldier let go of his plasma cannon, relying on the straps to keep it secure, and drew a short knife from his waist. He stabbed the blade into a gap in the alien's wrist armor. The Xyrillian roared in pain but refused to release its grip, hurling the man over its shoulder into a seething mass of servitor beasts. Jacob knew there was no saving his comrade, as the man's strength was no match for the combined might of the aliens. Nevertheless, a grim smile crossed Jacob's face when a massive explosion tore through the pile of aliens, triggered by the soldiers' remaining grenades. The ship's marines bore the brunt of the assault. Unlike the sons of Karish, whose armor could withstand the aliens' powerful jaws and claws, the marines' vacuum suits were no match. Bites from the servitor beasts ripped great holes in their suits, leaving them vulnerable to further attacks. With each passing moment, more Marines fell to the relentless onslaught, despite everyone's best efforts. Even while fighting, Jacob coordinated the overall battle. His body moved and fired automatically, following the retreat orders from his lieutenant, as his mind focused on positioning his men where they were needed most. As a scion of Karish, he was expected to do more than just fight. He was the apex of his house and would not bring shame to his world. This sentiment was shared by all the sons of Karish across the ship. Their calm actions and tireless fighting, even as more aliens boarded, demonstrated their unwavering resolve. The Marines, however, began to falter under the relentless fighting. Unlike Jacob and his brothers, they lacked decades of training and experience. Most of their duties involved maintaining peace aboard the ship and protecting the crew and passengers, not battling ferocious aliens. They were trained to deal with human rebels, not extraterrestrial threats. Despite their resolve, it seemed that all the training in the world wouldn't matter if the battle couldn't be won. The heavy driver cannons slowly took down the hulking Xyrillians, while a steady stream of grenades kept the servitor hounds at bay. But more firepower was needed to push the aliens back. Fortunately, reinforcements arrived. The thud of massive boots against the metal deck heralded the arrival of 3 enormous armored suits. These exoskeletons, built around human operators, were different from the standard armor of the sons of Karish. The massive prelates appeared distorted, with stubby legs that slammed into the ground and long arms that wielded boxy cannons. Their necklace, armored faces protruded between 2 hissing shoulder units, and large tanks on their backs carried reactors to power the suits and fuel their weapons. In the close quarters of the ship, the prelates had one primary weapon, the plasma cannon. The remaining humans cheered, their voices barely audible in the smoke-filled, blood-soaked air, as the sons of Karish made way for the prelates. The first prelate leveled his cannon and fired, flooding the hallway with blinding yellow light. Solar shields on Jacob's armor activated, allowing him to see as superheated plasma washed over the nearest Xyrillian, turning its armor to ionized gas. Servitor hounds caught in the blast were vaporized, while those just outside the area were cooked alive by the heat. Before the aliens could regroup, the second and third prelates fired. In moments, they had undone the aliens' progress, turning the tide of battle. The prelates advanced, their cannons firing at regular intervals, leaving a trail of scorched bodies and glowing metal. The thermal control system struggled to dissipate the heat, but Jacob didn't mind. He moved forward to cover the prelates, reaching the breach point and firing into the hole. The burnt remains of aliens littered the ground. It didn't take long for the prelates to break through something on the other end. The atmosphere, already thinned by the violence, was sucked into the void as the alien hallway broke under the fire, signaling the end of the boarding action in this location. "Prelate," Jacob called over the local net. "How are your men doing?" "Fuel reserves at 60%, the squad leader responded. "No significant injuries to report, Lord Scion." Jacob could have retrieved this information from his helmet's data feed, but he preferred to confirm it personally when possible. "Proceed to your next target." "Of course, Lord Scion," the prelate nodded. The hulking suits robbed them of most agility, making their movements appear slow and awkward, though they were moving as quickly as possible in the massive armor. Each suit was expensive and difficult to transport, which is why they were reserved for critical moments. They were like a microcosm of the sons of Karish, waiting in the wings until called upon, then responding with overwhelming force. As the prelates moved to their next objective, Jacob's lieutenant shouted, "Find a hull patch. Let's get this sealed before the aliens come back." Though outranking the lieutenant, Jacob stepped into a nearby machine shop to find a large metal plate to cover the breach. He remembered the teachings of their ancestor, Karish the Mighty, "Be humble. There is no glory in death, no honor in killing. This is a job like any other. Do not think yourself better than others, even if you are. In the end, when humanity stands on the brink, they will call for you, and you will respond. Not for honor, glory, or rewards, but because it is your duty. And we do it better than anyone else."